Hello fiber friends and family, and welcome back. This is the Massallo Shawl Knit Along Part 2 here on YouTube. I'm your host Louis Boria, also known as Brooklyn Boy Knits, and I want to welcome you all back. For those of you that are just coming on for the first time, I'm going to ask you to pause that button right now because there's one more video that you have to watch. So I'm going to ask you to pause that button, head on over to video 1 of the Massallo Shawl Knit Along, and then you can watch this video. For those of you coming back, welcome back. I'm so excited to see you all sending me these messages and all the photos you have been sending me throughout social media. You have been emailing them to me. These whips are amazing, and I love to see the colors that you're all coming up with. And I have a question for everybody, and I want you to answer this question at the next Instagram live video. How many of you are surprised by the way your sections are looking based on the colors that you paired them with? Because if you're like me, you're not getting what you thought you were going to get. And that's what I love so much about these shawls, is that your sections are coming out completely different than what you had imagined, because how your colors are blending with the stitches that we're doing, right? So those slip stitches play an important part with this shawl. And also on the reverse side, where you see your knit one purl one section, which is the ribbing section, that also is starting to look a little different also. So I'm just curious to find out how many of you, like myself, have are a little surprised with the sections, the way they're coming out. Now for me, I loved the color combinations that I thought were going to be different, right? However, some of you are showing me your whips and showing me how you paired them completely different, and I love that. I love that so much. With that said, today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you that little section that I called the breaks in our shawls, where we're separating section 1 and section 2 with the eyelet rows that I explained to you. Now, I do have to make mention about the eyelet rows. It's not a must, and I kept stressing that over and over throughout Instagram. A lot of you have been sending me messages saying, Louis, it's not in the pattern. I know it's not in the pattern. I gave the formula last week, and I'm going to also repeat this on the video today. If anybody's still confused and still wants to continue making those eyelet rows to break up your sections, just let me know, send me a message, and we'll work on that together, okay? With that said, I want you to pull out your needles, pull out those whips, and let's begin the Massallo Shawl Knit Along Part 2. Of the Massallo Shawl Knit Along. The first thing I want to do is talk about the breaks, right? So we talked about adding on a little something extra onto our shawls, which I mentioned in our Instagram live the other night, of how we're gonna break this up a little bit. Now it's not a must. If you guys want to stick to the pattern and switch off to the next section, which is section 2, you're gonna want to skip this part. But I thought it would be a fun idea for this knit along to add in an extra section that's not in the pattern itself. So for those of you that are coming onto this knit along, and this is you know, you didn't get a chance to see the Instagram live I did a few days after I released the first video. In the video I talked about how we can add on eyelet rows in between section 1 and section 2. So what I promised all those that were following me on Instagram the other night was that I was going to do a quick demonstration in video 2. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do now. So if you don't want to do this next section in your shawl, which is just, you know, it's just a little extra something for our shawls, you don't have to do this part. It's not a must. So you can skip this part of the video and then come back so I can show you how to properly join on the third color for section 2. Okay, so we're gonna add an eyelet row, but I think, you know, and I mentioned this earlier, to add on maybe 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 eyelet rows. I would say 4 to 2 or 4 would be great to start with. And if you see that you want to keep going and you want to make your eyelet section a little bit bigger, then by all means go ahead. My next color that I'm going to be working with is going to be the blue, right? So that's going to be my yarn A. And remember, we're working on the slip stitch side, which is always going to be your odd row. So that first stitch, what are we going to do? We're going to always knit that first stitch, okay? And for this eyelet section, I'm going to start off with a yarn over, and then I'm going to knit 2 together. And I'm going to do that straight across the row. So let me show that again. So we're going to yarn over, knit 2 together. Yarn over, knit 2 together. Yarn over, knit 2 together. Now I just wanted to make mention, some of you have been messaging me asking me about, Louis, how wide should I go, being that we are working in full skeins here. In the pattern, you'll see that I had called out for 150 yards, which are half skein DK weight skeins, which was half weight, which was 150 yards. So many of you have been asking how wide I should go. So I'm going to pause here for a second. And what I did here was I measured along the edge here. So this edge is where we switch on and off in colors. I have about 11 inches here. If you want to do 12 inches, you want to do 15 inches, I would say try it. You know, again, we're using these full skeins. Now, there's no guarantee that all your sections would be exactly the same length. So I would suggest 10 to 12 inches measuring on the side here, just to play it on the safe side. Again, we're playing around with the idea of, you know, using as much of the yarn as we can. I think we'll be okay. Now, if you stick to the standard size that I have in the pattern, you should be able to get at least 2 shawls out of all this yarn. Okay, so I'm just going to keep on going here. I'm continuing my yarn over and then knitting 2 together. This is what we do to create our eyelet rows. For those of you that have never done eyelet rows before, they're just great. I love stacking eyelet rows on top of each other. It just gives it a really cool, dimension actually. So I'm just going ahead. I'm going to finish up here till we get to the end of the row. Okay, so I'm almost nearing the end here on the first, on the odd row where I'm doing my yarn overs and knit 2 together, to form the eyelet row. Now I'm gonna work this down to the last 2 stitches. Okay, now typically we work to the last stitch on this row, on the odd row, before we do that yarn over and then knit front and back as we usually do. But in this case, because I ended not having an equal amount, because we always need that last stitch by itself, but being that I don't have a knit 2 together at the very end, what I'm gonna do is I finished off with the yarn over here, and then the knit 2 together here, and then I'm just going to knit the next stitch. Okay, yarn over as we normally would do on every odd row towards the end, and then knit front and back of that last stitch. Okay, so that last stitch, we're always going to repeat that two-step where we go ahead and we do the double increase, where we yarn over and then knit for end back. So we're going to work, you're going to work that first eyelet row, okay? Just like I said, starting with that first stitch where we always knit that first stitch, yarn over, knit 2 together, all the way across the row till we get to the last 2 stitches. When we get to those last 2 stitches, we're going to knit that second to last stitch, yarn over, knit front and back, okay? Now, we're going to work the even row, where we're going to start off with the yarn over as we always do, okay? We're going to knit the next 2 stitches. We're going to knit through the back loop of the 4th stitch, as we always do. And then here, we're just going to knit all the way across till we get to our last 2 stitches. Okay, so I am nearing the end of the second row to the eyelet row section, and remember to knit to the very last 2 stitches of this row, because we're going to repeat what we always have been doing in the pattern. We're going to knit these last 2 stitches together. It's a little tricky there, hold on, there we go. Okay, so I just completed my first row of eyelet row. Well, first eyelet row. There we go. So that's what it looks like up close. And it looks like nothing right now, obviously, but what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add in a second row using the white. Remember to cross over the new color over the blue. All right, that's the trick. And then I want you to make sure that you guys are continuing that sequence and crossing over your yarn so that you have a nice finished look at the end, okay? Now I know a lot of you are seeing this right now where your end's curling. You should be having that. Everyone's gonna have that issue. Until we block it, it's gonna continue to curl like that, all right? So just giving you guys a heads up on that. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start on the white, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to repeat the sequence again, where I'm going to knit that first stitch on the odd row with the white. Tighten that up there. Okay. Remember to yarn over and knit 2 together. Yarn over, and we're going to knit 2 together. Yarn over, knit 2 together. Yarn over, knit 2 together. Okay, so I'm nearing the end here. I'm just going to continue finishing with my yarn over, knitting 2 together. Now I'm down to my last 2 stitches, okay? And all I'm gonna do is knit that last stitch, yarn over, and then I'm gonna knit in the front and back of that last stitch. I'm gonna continue, I'm gonna do my last row, and then we're gonna go ahead on working on joining yarn C. So now to go on the even side, which is always gonna be our knit one purl one side, our ribbing side, we're gonna go ahead, yarn over. Remember, we're gonna continue in sequence as the pattern, which is knit the next 2 stitches. And then we're gonna knit from the back of the 4th stitch, that loop, knit from the back of the loop, okay? And then we're just gonna knit straight across to the last 2 stitches. All right, so I'm getting down to the last few stitches here. Remember, we're gonna knit to the last 2 stitches, okay? We're gonna take those next 2 stitches and we're gonna knit those 2 stitches together. All right, there we go. Now, I just want to show you where I'm at in my pattern. Again, I decided I was going to add 2 eyelet rows, not 1. And you can see them there. And it gives it a nice little break in the pattern. Just going off course a little bit here. I wanted to do this just to give it a little bit more dimension. And this is for all you folks now that want to go ahead and just kind of break up the pattern a little bit. I know it's a 2-row repeat, so I figured it'll be fun just to go ahead and add this little extra element into this knit along. And again, now this is not a must. This is just for those that choose to want to add something a little bit different to their shawl. So this is what you'll get. Now you can totally go ahead and continue in sequence, stacking your colors against each other in section 1. Now when you're ready to start section 2, which I'm going to go ahead and show you in the next clip, we're going to go ahead and stop here. Now I want you to keep in mind that the blue is my A, the white is my B, okay? The blue is my A, the white is my B. Okay, so now that we are ready to begin on section 2, the first thing we're going to want to do is cut yarn A. Okay, so my blue is going to be my yarn A, and you'll notice on your pattern right before you get to section 2, it already mentions that we're going to cut yarn A and we're going to add yarn C. So when I cut my yarn, I like to leave a 6-inch tail. So I'm going to cut my yarn. And I'm going to grab my yarn C. And as I showed you guys in video 1, the way I like to join my yarn is a little bit differently than most people do. Maybe some people do add their yarn on this way, but I like to start off with my slip knot. And then I'm just going to feed that tail onto my slip knot, through my slip knot, sorry. And I'm going to go ahead and feed that all the way to the top of my yarn. Now, why should we not add the new color to yarn B? The reason why is because we have to bring this up. Remember how we're crossing over our yarn, right? One in front of the other every time we switch colors. So we want to keep that sequence going even though we're cutting yarn B. Okay, this was my yarn B. We're leaving that 6-inch tail, and I added yarn C to yarn A, to yarn A. I'm going to be carrying that over through the front because that's going to be my next color. So we're starting with yarn C, okay? Now in the pattern, you're going to notice we're going to start off with that first knit stitch, Okay, we're going to bring our yarn to the front, because now remember, we're working on the odd row, right? So we're going to continue, even though some of us may have not did that extra section with the eyelet rows. If you didn't, it doesn't matter whether or not whether or not you did the eyelet row section. We're going to continue in pattern regardless. Okay, so when we're adding on that yarn C, we're going to start off with the first stitch, which is a knit. Then we're going to keep our yarn in the front. We're going to slip the next stitch purlwise with the yarn in front, and then we're going to purl the next stitch. We're going to continue doing that all the way down to the last stitch. Okay, so we're going to slip that next stitch purlwise with the yarn in front, purl the next stitch, slip that stitch purlwise with the yarn in front, next stitch we're going to purl it. Remember to keep that going all the way through to the very last stitch of every odd row. Okay, so I'm going to continue doing this row all the way to the very last stitch. Okay, so I'm coming down to the last few stitches here. And remember, I'm going to work all the way down to my very last stitch. Okay, when I get to my last stitch, remember, I'm going to yarn over and knit front and back of that very last stitch. Okay, now for the even side row in section 2, with yarn C, we're going to yarn over. We're going to knit the next 2 stitches. 1, 2. Okay, look what's happening here, guys. You see how that gold stitch is falling behind the white stitch? That's my yarn over. My yarn over should be in front. So sometimes that happens in our knitting, and I just want you guys to be careful. Remember, I told you early on that those first 4 stitches all have to be the same color. All right, so I just want you to keep mind of that. All right, so for this 4th stitch, I'm gonna knit 1 through the back loop of the 4th stitch, and there we have our first 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, keeping in sequence for section 2, we're gonna purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1. So basically, I'm purling all the whites and I'm knitting all the gold stitches. Depending on your color sequence, just keep in pattern. Remember to keep in pattern. It's really, really important. And we're going to do this to the very last 2 stitches. Okay, so I'm coming down to the very last few stitches here on my even side row, which is my knit 1, purl 1 side. And remember, we're knitting 1, purling 1 all the way down to the very last 2 stitches on this row. And we're going to knit those last 2 stitches together. Okay, so just to recap, we just finished the first 2 rows in our yarn C colorway, right? And remember, always, it's really important that we join the new color to the yarn that we just finished cutting. So for instance, in section 1, my blue was my A, that was the color that I was cutting. I left a 6-inch tail. You want to leave at least a 6-inch tail. And then we're gonna join the next color onto that one that we just cut. So wherever you are in your pattern, whether you're on row section 2 or section 6, it doesn't matter. You're always going to join the new color to the yarn that you just cut. Okay, and we're going to continue that. Now, whether or not you're doing that eyelet section, that's just an added bonus section for this knit along. It's not in the pattern, and I've mentioned this before. This is totally optional. And if you need more information on how to continue doing this eyelet row, I can go ahead and send you the information. Just DM me, email me at brooklynboyknits.com, and I'll gladly send you more information. In the meantime, I'm going to continue, but there's just one more thing I want to show you, which some of you have been asking me about these tails. So in the next section, the final section of today's video, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to weave in those ends, because there is a certain way I want you guys to weave your ends in. Okay, there is a certain side that I want you to make sure that we're hiding those ends. For this next part, I want to go ahead and show you guys how to properly weave in the ends to the Massallo shawl. Now, a lot of folks have been asking me, Louis, I want to know how to weave in the ends properly. So as you go along in your sections, you're going to keep having these two little guys popping out all the time, right? So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to go ahead and do that. So we'll start here with my blue, which was my yarn A in section 1. Now, we got our slip stitch side, and we have our knit one, purl one side, which is the ribbing side. We are going to always weave in our ends on this side, which is the knit one, purl one side, or the rib side. So, being that I have the blue here, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I weave in my ends wherever those blues are. So you're going to go in and out of those stitches. You just pick up a couple stitches wherever you see the blue on that rib side and just weave in, and then just cut. Same thing, we're going to do the same thing for the gold. Again, for those of you that wanted to know how to weave in, what side are we weaving in on, never weave in on the side where your slip stitches are, because it's gonna look funny. Now I'm having a little difficulty here with the gold. Get that through. And again, we're gonna look for the gold. Okay, so you're gonna weave in your ends going through the gold stitches. Well, in my case, the gold stitches. And that's it, guys. So just remember to keeping the colors together is really important, and always remember to make sure that you're weaving your ends in on that knit one, purl one side, or the ribbing side.